Hey, welcome to another episode of the Core Link Solution, where we look to empower you with awareness and actionable insights. My name is James Rosseau, and I'm your host. For those joining us during the live stream, thank you for being a part of it. Please feel free to ask your questions within the comment section of Facebook or within the question section on YouTube, or the chat section on YouTube, rather. Tonight's topic is caring for yourselves and others as a leader, featuring special guest, smiling gentleman right there, Shola Richards. Shola, so good to see you.
James, my man, it's a pleasure. Thank you so much for the invitation, my man. I'm so glad to be here.
Absolutely. And it's just our second live stream, so really good to have you on, man. Really good to have you on. And
hey,
go ahead.
I didn't get to be first though, man. I thought I was gonna be number one. What happened?
There you go. I shouldn't have told you. But why this topic is important, I'd like to set that up, is many of us, when we think about preventative maintenance, have learned, some of us the hard way, when we think about our vehicles as an example, that preventive maintenance can help you extend the lifetime of your vehicle, helps you from not breaking down the road, keeps the short-term utility going, reduces expenses, but again, extends the lifetime. The same is true when it comes to ourselves, but a lot of times those things get overlooked. And so this episode is understanding how you can help with human preventative maintenance, for lack of better terms, right? The benefits, the how-tos, and how you can lead it as a leader as well. So let me introduce Shola. Shola is a dynamic speaker, the best-selling author of Making Work Work, the author of the newly released book, Going Together. He's an in-demand workplace civility expert, and he is a positivity writer with a passionate worldwide following. His articles in wildly popular Monday Morning Positivity Solution email series has been read by readers in over 160 countries, and his work has been featured in the Huffington Post, Forbes, Black Enterprise, Complete Wellbeing India, Business Insider Australia, and in numerous publications all over the world who recognize him as an authority on workplace happiness and engagement. As a speaker, Shola has shared his transformative message with leading healthcare organizations, top universities, Silicon Valley, the motion picture industry, and on TEDx stage. And in his greatest honor to date as a keynote speaker for the Department of Homeland Security 3 days before the 15th anniversary of 9/11 under the Obama administration. Last but certainly not least, Shola is a father, husband, identical twin, and a self-professed kindness extremist. I never heard that before, Shola, who will not rest until bullying and incivility is extinct from the American workplace. So please join me in welcoming again Shola Richards. Shola, thank you, sir.
James, it's funny. I never know what my face should look like when people are reading my bio. I get really kind of uncomfortable and weird. I don't know if I'm supposed to look at the camera, smile, be proud. I don't quite have that figured out yet. I got to work on that.
Did you wish I'd taken you off the screen and then brought you back when I finished reading?
No, it's all good. I have to learn to kind of, it's funny because I share with a lot of people that for years I've suffered from the imposter syndrome, right? This idea of like, oh my gosh, it's another day where no one found out that I don't know anything, right? So it's like, I struggle with that, and I struggled with that for years. So it's something that I need to step into a little bit more. So even an exercise of listening to the comments and just taking it in is something that I got to get used to.
It is, man. It is. Well, one of the things that I love to ask folks as we get going is, and it's going to be hard for you because you share a lot, you're very open and transparent, but I'm going to try one anyway, and let's see if you can do it. What is one thing that you can share with the audience that most folks don't know about Shola Richards?
Oh gosh, that most folks don't know, because I'm a big sharer. Well, I think one of the things that a lot of people don't know is that I am a highly sensitive person in HSP. So I have the empathy gene on steroids, and I'm not quite sure if it's a superpower or a disability. I haven't quite found that point yet. But I mean, I feel things very deeply, and unfortunately that causes me a lot of pain and suffering, especially during times like these. I'm sure we'll get into that, but that's something that I don't really talk about. I think when you become a public figure, and most recently there's a post that went viral, and a lot of people got to see it and read it, about me taking a walk with my daughter and my dog Ace, and the comments were lovely. But then of course, there's some crazy stuff that also comes at you too, that just kind of hurts. So but it's important to step through it to make sure that the message is heard.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. You know, it's funny. I thought you might mention the Amazing Race thing, but maybe it was just me that learned that not too long ago. I was even trying to dig up some footage. I was trying
Oh
hard
God.
for video footage. But
There's
I
no
couldn't
there's no highlights.
Yeah, no highlights. Yeah. But Shola was on the Amazing Race season. What season was that?
I think it's season 2.
Season 2. Yeah. I did find like, a stock picture or two, but it just wasn't the same. So I left that out. Yeah.
I was a lot younger, a lot more svelte. I had my kind of my girlish figure. Now that not so much anymore.
Bro, listen, you're fine. Okay. I'm sure your wife says you're fine. Don't worry about it. So let's do this. So one of the things that and again, when we planned this and scheduled this was a couple weeks ago. A lot has transpired since then. So let me just say this. We would be remiss not to talk to this in the context of everything that's going on around us right now, right? We have the pandemic, which is one crisis to deal with, but now on top of that, we have everything going in terms of the social unrest that came out of recent events, right? And we need to address this topic with all that in this context. And so we'll try to do that as we go through this. Shola, let's start here. I always think it's helpful to start with your why and what brought you into this focus on positivity and workplace civility. Maybe you can share your story a little bit.
Yeah, man, happy to. So it's got to go back probably 15 years. 2005, I was working for a work environment that could only be described as soul destroying. And that is not meant for hyperbolic effect. I'm talking one of the darkest workplaces I've ever seen, where there was racism, bullying, harassment, sabotage, physical altercations, things that were cartoonishly inappropriate. And I remember after 2 years, to give you an example, because I want to be so clear when I talk about this. There was a group of people who didn't like me, and they didn't like me because I smiled too much. And I swear to you, that's the reason why. And they're like, I'm going to break him. So what they would do, I'd make my lunch. And it was like a sandwich. I mean, nothing special because I can't really cook. And I would put it in the break room fridge. The people who were harassing me would pull my sandwich out of the break room fridge, step on it so I could see the footprint in the bread, and then put it back into the fridge. And they would do this consistently over a period of months. And I fell into a deep, 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 deep depression. And that's not meant to say that euphemistically. I'm talking about deep clinical depression. And to make a long story very short, when I was depressed one morning in 2005, I decided that I was going to take my own life. And it wasn't a decision. It wasn't something that I thought about. It's something that I actually attempted. And long story short, I was trying to drive down the I-405 freeway in Los Angeles. I tried to drive it my car off the overpass to make it look like an accident. For reasons I'm not quite clear on, the car came back onto the overpass, and I sat there just crying and crying and crying about what I almost did. But the cool thing about that moment, which was by far my darkest moment in my life, is that I determined my why. And my why was like, I can't be the only person who's dealing with this. I just can't be.
Right.
And then I did some work and some research. I was trying to figure out, like, workplace toxicity. Is it just me? But it's 60 million Americans are currently dealing with this now. 60 million, the more than the population of 14 US states. So because of that, I was like, I gotta do something about this. I gotta find a way to make this stop. And that's what my why is, to help people who are struggling. And I've been fighting that fight ever since.
Amen. And so ever since. And what year was that again?
2005.
2005. Man.
2005. And interestingly enough, I didn't do a whole lot of work until maybe 2013, when I really got started putting my stuff out there.
Right.
I had a website address in 2008, and I hit publish on it until 2013. 5 years, because I was so scared of what people would say.
Yeah, man, that's amazing. And, I've heard you tell that story. This is probably the third time I've had the pleasure of being with you in a kind of a presentation sort of environment. Heard you tell it, and each time it's still just as you tell it, I can still almost get a visual, man, and it's gut wrenching, right? But the what you came out of that with, and what you've been able to do to touch people's lives since then, is just amazing. So again, thanks again, man, for being a part of this. So let's go into the topic itself, self-care. And, you call it positivity. I call it self-care. And one of the things I'll say to the audience is, Shola has a brilliant model. He calls his 4 keys. I have a model I call SCORE for leaders in managing through unpredictable moments. And the first 2 letters, SCORE is an acronym. The first 2 letters are self-care and community care. So we're going to go back and forth a little bit between his 4 keys and my S&C, and try to make something for you that you walk away with, again, with some awareness and some actionable items that you can walk away with this from and put to action tonight, tomorrow, to make a difference for yourself and your teams. So maybe, Shola, why don't we start with you in terms of self-care, and I always like to start with, why is self-care even important?
I mean, it's the most important thing. I mean, the most important love is the love that you give to yourself. You can't love someone else effectively if you don't love yourself. You mentioned the most overused analogy with this is the airplane, right? Where they tell you when the pressure drops, make sure you put on your mask first before you put on the mask of others. And that's completely the case here. And I think during hard times, specifically in crisis, when you're talking about people who are surrounded by news that is really dark right now, you're talking about a global pandemic that's been hitting us hard, isolating people, unemployment.
Yes.
I think now, if we don't really make a practice of self-care, and I'm not talking about the easy self-care stuff, like, go to the spa, which most people can't do, at least not in Los Angeles. We're totally locked down. So there's not that. But I mean, I'm talking about the hard stuff, like setting healthy boundaries, turning off the news, distancing yourself from social media, removing toxic influences from your life, people. I've told this to many people. Now's the time to really start thinking about the people in your life who fill you up and the people who drain you. Ooh, and man, real talk. I mean, if you keep people in your life who drain you consistently, it's just going to wither away at your mental health. I will say this clearly. I'm looking to the screen. People hear me when I say this. Some people need to be loved from a distance. And until we get to the point where we realize that we need to take care of us so that we can be better humans, so we can go ahead and fight the battles that need to be fought, whether it's, the civil unrest or racism or all these things that are going on, we're not going to be able to do it if we're broken and unwell ourselves. So it has to start there.
Absolutely. And, so I'll add the self-care why from a leadership perspective, right? And I talked about this a couple of weeks ago. When you're leading teams, particularly in times of, unpredictable moments, high level of crises, etc. And the example I gave was 9/11, when I happened to be leading a few hundred people. You jump into hyper performance mode, right? Because it's just a part of what you do. Oftentimes as leaders, I like to say we operate in a mode of unconscious competence. We know what to do. We deal with it. When complexities come, we turn up the juice, so to speak, and want to do more, right? And we want to care for folks, and we feel like we need to be there and care for folks almost 24/7. However, to Shola's point, the example I use is putting the mask on first. We feel guilty almost putting the mask on first. But the whole thing in the point around putting the mask on first is you're putting your oxygen on first, so you actually can sustain yourself to be in service to others. So that's the one point I like to stress to leaders. And the second thing to stress is exampleship, which is a word that's been made up over the years. I'm still not sure it's an official word accepted by the dictionary yet, but hopefully if I keep saying it and others keep saying it, they'll accept it. But exampleship, right? As you're leading teams and you want to say to them, hey, take care of yourselves and so on and so forth. We all know what you say is one thing, but what you do in pattern is another thing. So you need to lead by example, and they need to see you leading by example. And in fact, as you're then having your staff meetings and so on and so forth, you can talk about what you're doing, what you're learning, how you're taking care of yourself, etc. And it will help you a ton. Last but not least, and we can move on to some of the hows under the self-care, and Shola's first key is Mayo Clinic and others have done tons of work in this space. Okay. Continued lack of self-care leads to chronic stress. Chronic stress leads to tons of things like anxiety, disability to work, so on and so forth, mentally, and not show up and be there. So in other words, you'll be incapacitated at some point as chronic stress takes hold, and you won't be able to perform and lead your people and do what you intend to do in the first place. So those are some of the whys that self-care is important as a leader. So, okay, so back to you, Shola. Let's hit that first key.
Well, you know, it's funny. I'm actually going to go in reverse order of how I present it, because I think there's some things that need to, I'm going to go at the end with my fourth key first, strangely. And the reason why, because I think it really hits some of the challenges that we're facing now. One of the keys around self-care is this thing around creating safety, specifically psychological safety. Psychological safety, not to get too deep into this, but Google did an amazing study, for a better way of putting it, called Project Aristotle, where they found out, and they did some work to figure out exactly what makes a highly functioning team. And they found out the number one factor is this thing called psychological safety. I'm summarizing or kind of paraphrasing this, but it's the ability to raise your hand and say, I don't know, or I'm scared, or I'm burned out, I need help.
Yes.
Without fear of being shamed for doing so. And if we as leaders can step into this, I think a good example now is what's going on with the racial civil unrest in our country. So recently, a lot of people came to me and like, hey, Shola, in the past couple of days, I don't know what to do. I need help. I need to know, I want to be an ally. I want to be supportive of this. I feel like I feel sad that you can't walk with your girls. By the way, this probably should have said, like, this is my why. I mean, these kiddos.
There you go.
I mean, yeah, they're my babies right there. Right. But they would tell me, I want to be an ally. I want to help. I want to be able to do something. And that could be an opportunity for me to be like, well, look it up your damn self. I mean, and I actually had a really, really strong argument with another one of my friends, another black man, about this. And he's like, dude, your job is not to go out there and hand pick resources for people to be allies. They should look it up on their own, man. I was like, listen, if I have an opportunity to help, I'm going to help. I'm going to create that psychological safety. Yes. And I feel like as a leader, that's what I'm here to do, is to do whatever I can to lead with kindness and civility. James, you know this about me. You know me personally. You know that the number one thing is I am a kindness extremist. You know my nickname is Brother Teresa. You know this about me.
Yes.
So yeah, because I mean, I want to help. So we have to create that safety. And I think as leaders, in order to care for others, and here's why this matters. I'm going to get really specific. Because of COVID-19 and the isolation that I think a lot of people have faced right now, domestic violence is on the rise right now, and against women and children, and it's bad, and it's pervasive. If people don't normally ask for help because they're scared to, they're embarrassed to, or whatever. So people could be suffering in your neighborhoods, in your communities, whatever. And if you can create that safety, that safe space for people to be like, hey, Shola, I got to tell you something. That could be the difference right now between life and death, madness and sanity, health and illness. So we have to take that step. So I want to start with psychological safety, because I think a lot of leaders struggle with that. They shame people for not knowing. They don't give proper help and support. And I think there's so much that we need to do on that. So just throwing that out there.
No, that's good.
Can I think that's something we'll talk about.
Yeah,
please,
no, absolutely.
Anything.
So like in this moment, let's play this out for a second. And again, this was not our planned topic to deal with this, but it's good. Let me say it this way. We, again, decided right before coming on, literally 10 minutes before, we'd be remiss not to talk about what's happening right now. We both felt, given our relationship and everything else, right, we're comfortable talking about it, like literally on the fly. So, you know, Monday morning, you as a leader now step into your day, and you have team calls and such, one-on-ones and so on and so forth. How do you begin to help create that psychological safety for your team? What are some things that you would throw out as how-tos, so to speak, to do that?
So this is an important question. And the first step is to realize that your Black colleagues are not okay. I mean, they're not okay. There's not a so I'm a lover. I'm not a fighter. I'm not going to be going around like setting things on fire. My way of suffering is I'm not eating. I'm not sleeping. I have been less present. I've been scared about my own health, the health of my kids, the health of my brothers. So just that has to be the first step to just
Yeah.
make sure people know they're okay. But as a leader, it's having the emotional intelligence and the freaking empathy to look at them through the screen if you're doing this virtually,
Yes.
and just simply be like, hey, can we talk about, can I help? What is going, tell me how you're feeling. And then create this environment where people can actually share openly. Now it's tricky if you're the type of leader that hasn't done that before and now you're doing it, it's going to seem a little bit disjointed. So you're going to maybe have to ease into it. But I think it's best to rip the Band-Aid off, knowing that we're in this space of discomfort where everyone's thinking about it. The elephant's sitting over there in the corner staring at us. We might as well go ahead and address it, knowing that in doing so, it's going to allow someone to feel better. But here's the thing that leaders need to do specifically is they need to be the one that gets on the dance floor first, meaning they have to be the one that says like, hey, I'm going to start off how I'm feeling. And if you're a white man or a white woman, for example, like I had a lot of eye-opening experience in the past couple of days about my own privilege and what I didn't know was going on in this country. And I'm a little bit embarrassed. I'm going to share with some of you, and I hope you can forgive me for some of the things I didn't know. I'm coming to this team, letting you know that I have a lot of work to do on this, and I'm hoping that you can guide me and support me through this as I will support you as your leader. That's like, yo, okay, we can do this now. But if we don't do that and pretend to be a leader where it's like, no, I have to have all the answers and I can't look soft because vulnerability is weakness. My girl, Brene Brown says otherwise.
That's right.
Sorry. I love Brene Brown. I love Brene Brown. If any of y'all know how to get me in touch with her, please do.
Yeah, share that with you. We have to get her on the podcast at some point.
Oh man, it's borderline stalker level. I need to get it under control. But Brene does talk about that, and I think it's an important thing to realize that vulnerability is not weakness, especially now because everyone's struggling. So I think it's an important thing to talk about.
Yeah. No, that's so good. And there's 2 or 3 things you said in there. I just want to touch back on real quick. One, you said, this is how I process it. And that's so key. This is how I process it. Each person is going to process it in their own way, right? As unique as we all have unique fingerprints, our processing is different, right? Each person's the way they emote or not, right? They still have something going on inside. The way they process. My way of processing is I want to figure out the action path, right? So I start figuring out how to, I'm gathering information. I'm trying to pull stuff together. I'm grieving, right? In bursts, but I'm also thinking about what's next. That's my way. Yeah. I understand other people are going to have different ways. That's the first thing, right? Acknowledge as a leader that people are going to process in different ways, and you still have to be inquisitive and use your EQ to touch your team. The second thing you said was this point around, as leaders, we want to walk in with the answers baked. We want to walk in with the bullets from front to end. This is what happened. This is our assessment of it. This is what we're going to do. Here's what you're going to do. This is what the results are going to look like. And when we don't have that together, right? It's like we don't like saying, this is what's going on. This is how I'm feeling about it. This is what we're doing to date that I know. And there's a lot of things I don't know. And we're going to have to work together, be agile, be fluid. And, and here's what I promise to do during this moment, right? As the leader of this group, etc. Making those commitments around communication and things like that in this time are so important, and being open and honest about your feelings. So spot on. Thank you.
My pleasure.
All right, so let's go to the next key. Are you going totally in reverse order? Which way are you going?
Yeah, I know. I think I'm skipping around. And by the way, for anyone who's listening, I am going to make an offer, so it's in free because I'm all about free stuff. Yeah, this was so not planned, but I actually have a workbook. It's an e-workbook. I just printed it out that I can send to you that will help you through this self-care process. Really, really useful. So totally free. All you have to do is email me at sholarichards.com and just put workbook in the subject line, so I'll know what it's about, because I've gotten a ton of email in the past couple of days. So just make sure workbook is in there so I can easily scan through all the emails, and I can just turn around and send it to you. So you can have some documents and something that you can actually use and apply, because I want this to be actionable. So back to your second point. I'm kind of jumping around because this is not in order. So good. Now I'm going back to the first key. That was the fourth key, the one with the creating safety. But the first one is focusing on what you have the power to control. So I do not have the recipe for happiness. I'm a happy guy usually, though. But I do have the recipe for misery. The recipe for misery is focusing on the things that you do not have the power to control.
Yeah. Yeah.
I wish more people would realize this in terms of self-care, especially now. So we're looking at this world that is crumbling in some way. People are disconnected more than I've ever seen. There's a lot of fear about getting a virus, transmitting a virus to someone who has it or doesn't have it or whatever, making yourself feel unsafe. It's really hard. So when you focus on so many things that you don't have the power to control, you get to a point where you feel weak and you feel unable to do what's necessary to improve your life. So there's only 3 things, believe it or not, that we ever have control over at any given time. Only 3. And if you just remember these 3 things, then it's going to make things so much easier. The first thing are your actions, the things that you choose to do. The second thing is your effort, how hard you choose to try. And the third thing is your attitude, your habitual way of thinking. And I think about this often when I think about what do I have the power to control? And so when I'm looking at George Floyd getting brutally executed on the streets of Minneapolis, I do not have the power to control bringing him back. I cannot control if this will happen again. But what I've been given is an opportunity to share my voice. And that is totally within my control. And I can speak up. I can share how frustrated I am. I can bring some solutions to the table. I can help educate people who may not be educated on this topic to learn a little bit more in a gentle way so they don't feel uncomfortable about it. Maybe as uncomfortable as I do. But the idea is these are things that are within my control. So if it's in my control, I'm doing it. And maybe the most important one of those 3 things that I want to focus on is attitude. Because your habitual way of thinking is what's going to kind of get you through this stuff.
Right.
So I have a practical tool that I want to share with anyone who's listening that saved my life when I was in crisis, when I was suicidal, was this thing that I came up with called the 6 and 6 rule. People seem to love this, and I think it's really useful when you focus on what you have the power to control. I want you to think about this. If what you're worrying about right now will not be a big deal 6 months from now, then do not spend any more than 6 minutes of your time thinking about it.
I love this rule.
Now, this is why this matters so much, because this one I'm doing the crisis homeschooling thing, whatever you want to call it, and I was with my youngest daughter, and we're doing long division, and I don't know, it just wasn't working out very well. And she's getting upset, and I'm getting upset, and I'm like, I got a podcast to do with James. I got to go. And and I was like, well, wait a second. Is this really going to matter 6 months from now? Like what I'm currently focused on, like on December 1st, 2020, am I be like, yo, she just carried the 1 on that problem. We would have got the right answer. Like, no, I'm not going to be focused on that. So I'm not going to spend my time on the little stuff. The bigger things like systemic racism, the stress of isolation due to COVID-19, the challenges of unemployment and things that are happening around us and in this world, those are things that require my fullest effort and attention.
Yeah.
I can't be spending, everything can't be very important. If everything's very important, then nothing is. So I go back to the 6 and 6 rule. I'm not going to spend my time on the small stuff. I need to spend my energy on the things that truly matter.
That's good. That's good. And, in that vein, to the extent that people are saying, yes, I can go with you on that. And to your overall, your Uber focus of positivity, so on and so forth, I am pushing off my list things that don't match the 6 and 6. But now I'm squarely focused on what you just mentioned, systemic racism, the continued deaths, so on and so forth, and all the things that are happening around me, 30 plus cities with protests, many of which have erupted into riots, so on and so forth.
Yep.
And I've got what do you tell someone who is quote unquote a mentee, who comes to you for advice, who comes to you for coaching, etc. right now, of how to stay positive in this moment, what to focus on in this moment? What has been your counsel to people such as that?
Yeah. So my counsel is to be mindful of your intake. I think this is the one thing that most people don't think about. They spend a lot of time. I kind of touched on this a little bit, the whole things that fill you up versus the things that drain you. And I find that we spend a lot of time doing things that are very draining right now, whether it's 24-hour news coverage. You got breaking alerts coming to your cell phone. That's not helpful. So I think about your intake really, really wisely. So for me, I had to step back from the news because it was too much for me. So my thing is that I now have a goal of scanning headlines.
Yeah.
And once a day, I make a point once a day to scan headlines, and I see something that is important. I'll dive in a little deeper, but to have it on in the background, consistently taking your energy will literally bring you to a point of madness. At least it has for me when I was doing that recently. So I had to step away from that. When my mentees come to me or folks that ask, so the first thing is mind your intake.
Yeah.
But more than just removing the bad influences, it's also taking that space and filling them up with things that actually are useful. So I'm big on podcasts. I listen to podcasts often, and that helps me, like the core thing solution, obviously, to help me to get my mind right, to be able to stay well. I make sure that listen, I gotta rep the brand, man. I gotta take care of you, brother. So there's that. I gotta make sure that I'm also moving my body and I'm exercising, I'm getting enough sleep, which has been kind of challenging for me the past couple of days. Spending time with my girls and my wife and my dog. I mean, I really want to make sure that we're really connecting. These are things that I have to tell people to not take for granted and just, I'll get around to that later.
Yeah.
The healthiest people are the ones that are really diligent and, dare I say, maniacal about their intake and making sure that they don't let that stuff, that secondhand smoke, for lack of a better way of putting it, get in.
Yep. No, that's good. That's good. And, again, leadership addendum. So how does that apply to then managing the full day of business at work, right? Just 60 seconds on this. And I shared this the other week when Shola and I were at this conference. Think about everything your team has to go through, right? As Shola just did his 6 and 6, your team need to do the 6 and 6, right?
Yeah.
And there's two ways to do that. One is to do the personal 6 and 6 that Shola talked about, but also help them with their workload. Seriously. Okay. In these moments of crises and so on and so forth, workload and things that don't need to be there are that much more critical. They say in good times, the stuff that is kind of bloated doesn't hurt as much. In tough times, bloat kills you. Okay. And there are 3 simple lists you can make. And some call it a taxonomy. You can call it whatever you want to do, but you can start your Monday and go through Friday and just simply ask people to note down what they do every time they change a task during the course of the day. And you simply want to gather those lists and create from that 3 lists: stop, start, continue. What are the things, right? It's that simple. What are the things
do that?
Right? Yeah. I mean, seriously, but what happens in companies all the time, and we all know it, is the things, it's like watching that movie. Was it Office Space, or Office Space movie? And with the red stapler, right? It's like, the TPS reports. Nobody reads the TPS reports anymore, but you can't challenge anyone to stop the TPS reports. In moments like this, it's amazing how you can get approved to stop things that don't make sense and don't add value to your customers or the value chain. So number 1, stop things that don't make sense. 2, start things that will make your life easier, that you've been waiting to do, that have been in a quote unquote parking lot somewhere, right? You bring it up every 6 months. The technical team says, yeah, we'll get to it, but we don't have the right programmers, or people don't have time, so on and so forth. But it will make a world of difference again for you and your customers. That. And then the 3rd list is the continue list. And by the way, the continue list is not mathematical between start and stop. It is a list of things that you're sure about that add value for your customers or the internal team. Okay. So it's not just simply, plus start minus stop. It is, no, these things for sure add value. And that helps your team do the right things and get rid of things that don't make sense anymore. So use that as well, guys, in terms of with the 6+6 for your people.
Well, it's funny because I'm going to shift from my current civil rights hat to organizational development hat, which is the one I've been wearing the most. And when I also do start, stop, continue, and I think about when we go back to the workplace, where when you switch from virtual back to going into the office, the things that we need to think about are the ways that we used to work before does not make any sense anymore. And we need to think about what's coming in the workplace. We're going to think about, do you shake hands when you see people? The small stuff? What if you're someone who has seasonal allergies and is like sneezing all the time? People are gonna be like, what the heck is going on? And that person has anxiety going back into the office with this whole COVID-19 stuff. Not to mention the racial unrest that we talked about, but even so, meeting, workplaces 6 feet apart, Do you walk into an elevator if someone's in there? Do you wait for the elevator? Like, these are things that a lot of people aren't really thinking about right now.
Yes.
But you have to make a decision. Like, are some things, do we need to do this? Not to mention, many people are going to go back to work, maybe losing a loved one due to COVID-19, and thinking about this. And so important. So I just want to think of when you said, James, so brilliantly, we need to now think about the stuff that's not working and really make sure that we're not spending a second on the stuff that has very little to zero value.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. We have a question if you want to take it, Shola.
I'm all about questions.
Okay, awesome. This comes from Beth Albright. Been contemplating the advice of going to our Black colleagues and asking them for advice on how to handle the current unrest. How should we respond if the person feels further put upon to have to handle my feelings of ignorance in addition to what they're going through?
Yeah, so Beth, thanks for the question. There's a really good analogy about this, or metaphor. I always get those two confused. Around, it's like my ask, and I'm not going to speak for the entire Black community because that doesn't make any sense. But what I will do is I will just give you something to think about. We are struggling, and now I'm going to, in this moment, talk about the entire Black community. That I can say this with confidence that we're struggling right now. My hope is like, it's like when you're helping someone with their homework. If you're helping someone with their homework, what you're hoping that they're going to do is they're going to at least, here's some of the work that I've done, and I feel like this is okay, but is there anything that you can possibly help me with?
Yeah,
is a lot more meaningful ask than the, tell me how to be an ally. I mean, honest to God, there is so much information on the internet right now about this. This is like, it's the easiest Google search in the world. So what it does make people feel like is like, wow, like you honestly, you know, I'm struggling. I'm on the ground. I've just gotten just my behind beaten. I'm on the ground just reeling. And it's like, hey, get up and tell me how I can help you.
Yeah.
It's more like, instead, do the work to learn how to help and then apply that help. It's a different thing. I've been patient because I feel like all these attempts are in good faith. So for me, I tend to think of the intention. If the intention is good, but I want to make sure that to answer Beth's question, if you really think about someone who's struggling with this, I would start with making sure that you are doing your work. You have all your bases covered, at least the best that you can. You've done your research. And then take that research to a place where you can have some really good conversations. There's some good books too that are worth reading. I think How to Be an Anti-Racist. I love this book by Ibram Kendi is a really good book. And of course, White Fragility by Robin DeAngelis, I want to say is D'Angelo, I think is her name. Excuse me. Is an amazing place to start in terms of getting this information so you can be an ally. But do the work first is kind of my best thing I can say, and then at that point reach out.
I like that a lot. And I would just add to that, and I think, you know, something you said earlier I think applies here, right? If you, depending on the culture you've been cultivating and where you've been, it depends on how much time that research is going to take. So for example, if you don't have any D&I base within your company, right? It's not in your DNA at all, right? It's going to take that much longer if you're starting from nowhere. So the one thing I would say and challenge Shola you a little bit on is it's important to have the conversation sooner rather than later. If your research, for example, is going to take you 2 to 3 weeks, right? In other words, if you have no, I was going to say, it's one thing to sharpen your pencil on this, but if you don't have a pencil, right? Then, would you agree with that?
I agree with that, because I think, I mean, I'm all about having the discussions.
Yeah.
I got to counterbalance it with just making sure you're doing the work too. Yeah, don't sit back and hope that your Black colleagues or whoever will give you all the answers. But I'm all for having the discussions. And I also want to say this too, because this is super important.
Right.
What stops people from doing stuff, the hard work, is the fear of being perfect.
Yeah.
Look dumb. Let me shoot. I'm posting on social media. I have no idea whenever I hit send if someone's going to actually like what I'm saying, if it even makes any sense. I have no idea if people are going to think like, why'd you say that, Shola?
Yeah.
I'm willing to be clumsy. I'm willing to step into it and course correct as we go forward.
Yes.
If you're coming with a pure heart, and this is the most important thing, with a pure heart of kindness, love, support, collegiality, connectionness, Ubuntu, then we're going to be able to be cool. It's going to be fine. And even if, I'll give you an example. There's a time in college when I was working in like a food pantry for homeless people on one Thanksgiving and feeding food. And there's a person who was agitated or something like that. And he took his food and he flung it at me.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember thinking in the moment, I was probably like, 18 or 19 years old. I remember thinking that one interaction is not going to be enough to stop me from serving the other people who are very grateful for my presence here. Yeah. So you may choose to be an ally and run into a Black person who is seriously wounded, right? So when you're just remind you that seriously emotionally wounded, may even lash out at you.
Mm-hmm.
For you to be like, see, I'm not going to do this ally stuff. They don't seem to care. Like stop.
Yeah.
They're suffering, right? So that's the whole point. You're not, even if you get it wrong, here's the thing. And Danielle, I feel you. And here's the scary part. I promise you're going to get it wrong.
Yeah.
I promise you.
Yeah.
I promise you. We are all going to get it wrong. No one's going to get it right. That's the whole thing. But when you do get it right, it could literally save someone's life.
Yes.
Literally. So that's the reason why I do this stuff. I mean, hell, I didn't grow up being a motivational speaker. I decided, hey, I'm going to try to take some stuff and string some words together because I like writing and see if people are going to actually enjoy it. I got rejected from every single publisher that I sent my stuff to until eventually I finally got a deal. And then I just stumbled my way into figuring out how to do stuff. But failure is your teacher, and you're going to learn some stuff that I'm not going to do this again. Okay, that didn't work. So the next time I have a conversation, I'm going to do something else. And then before you know it, you become like an ally rock star. But it starts with the effort of just trying.
Absolutely. And to your point, what we were talking about are not in conflict at all. They're additive, right? That
absolutely
point of seeking out that information and coming prepared and sharing and saying, hey, this is what we've gotten so far. And I'm sure there's more out there, but would love to invite you in to collaborate on how we fix this, right? And then if they say, well, no, I'm not there, maybe you can suggest some other persons who might be, right? We want to build a council or, a team to really focus on this and come up with solutions together as opposed to just management. So many folks are going to invite that approach.
I agree.
I mean, are going to welcome that approach, right? All right.
Man,
go
ahead.
No, please. Go ahead. Finish your thought.
I was actually going to go and because I think that leads into the next key really quickly is this idea of, see, James, we're simpatico, man. I got you.
Yeah.
I think because I'm jumping around, I'm not doing this in order, is the importance of self-compassion.
Yeah.
I think this is one of the most important things. The words that we say about ourselves to ourselves is the most important thing right now.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're saying things like, oh, I'm an idiot, I cannot believe that I totally made a fool of myself. And okay. Cry hard, just don't cry for long. Like, figure out how can we get back and have that resilience to know that every time that I'm choosing to stay seated on the ground after making a mistake, beating myself up, is time that could be spent serving and helping someone else who's in crisis and struggling. So I'm big on self-kindness. I think this is the most important thing. When you have crazy thoughts of like, I'm useless and I'm not good enough, the question that I ask myself when I go to this place, especially when you fail, you're going to make some really stupid mistakes. And I'm talking to me as much as I'm talking to everyone that's listening. You're going to make some really, really dumb mistakes. And when you do make a mistake, if you see yourself going down that spiral of beating yourself up, pause for a minute and just ask yourself this simple question. Is this useful?
Yeah.
I do this all the time. Like when I'm like, when my post went viral, I was getting into the comments section and I was like, grrr, I gotta get and I was like, what am I doing? It's like,
that's a no. Don't go to the comments section.
I was like, man, I mean, it was like, because it had gotten out of control at that point.
Yeah.
And I was like, there's like 70,000 comments. I was like, I can't, that's not useful. So instead I want to focus on the people who do get it and how can I use my platform in a way that actually serves me. But beating myself up and not helping myself is just, I have an image that I usually share of a guy reaching through a mirror and hugging himself. And it says, life is too short to spend another day at war with yourself.
Right.
And I think that if we really do want to change the world, if we want to, it starts with the world that we need to change internally. And if we're not going to be kind to ourselves through this journey, we're not going to be able to be good parents. We're not going to be able to be good stewards. We're not going to be able to be good allies. We're not going to be able to be good citizens. We're not going to be able to be good humans. It requires us to start with ourselves.
Yeah.
So I'm very big on taking moments where what I have to say, because I've told you before, when little backstory, not too much, because I grew up being bullied. I had a stuttering problem as a kid, and my teeth were jacked up. And thank God for braces, braces, and then Invisalign as an adult. But because I was an easy target for bullies, I always had this underlying feeling of I wasn't good enough. I'm not good enough. And now what I have to say to myself as my self-kindness phrase, because I think everyone should have one, my self-kindness phrase is that I belong in any room that I walk into.
Yes.
I don't give, I mean, if Brene Brown called me and said, I want you on the Unlocking Us podcast, I'd probably lose my mind. And then I could go to this place like, you're not good enough to be there. You're not good enough. And then I have to stop. You belong in any room that you walk into. So this is what I have to keep reminding myself of, is self-kindness. And I think that's something that is important for all of us during this time, especially for people who are homeschooling their kids, who may have gotten to a point where they're feeling overwhelmed by this. You're not alone. What's being asked of us is impossible. To parent, teach, and work simultaneously it's not difficult because it's a lot. It's difficult because it's impossible. And then the sooner you realize that, the better it will be.
No, that's awesome. And, you remind me of two things. One, the brain science connected to this, right? And emotional intelligence. And two, I can't think of the author, but the book, The Power of Habit, right? How you break a habit loop. One of my favorite books, right? There you go. Love that book. And to do what you're talking about, that whole process of talking down to yourself in that downward spiral becomes a habitual thing, right? And I'm curious to know what I know what I did to help myself, because that was a bad habit of mine. What have you found in terms of tools and techniques to help break that down spiral when you're going down that down spiral, just like you said, to catch yourself and go, wait a minute, I am worthy of being in any room? What's helped you stop that down spiral and change that habit?
Man, I'll tell you, I have it so deeply grooved into the recesses of my brain that I walk into any door, any room, and I say I belong. It's my thing. I was going into my closet to get to pull my vest and shirt on for this, and I said it quietly. I said I belong. My kids were like, "What are you talking about? You're going to the closet." So like I just make it so habitual. But I also go back to what I said earlier. My interruption question is this useful? So when I'm going down that spiral and I'm spinning, I stop and ask myself, wait, is this useful? If the answer is no, I got to stop. I have to.
That's good. So what helped me when I read The Power of Habit, one of the things he talks about are the habit loops, right? And I forget the opening example, but he talks about, for example, chickens hear a certain sound and they know it's time to do X, right? And we all have these things that I think is a trigger. Then we do the loop and we expect the outcome, right? And so goes life. And so for me, because I'm a visual person and I can be very calendar driven, I either hang things around me that help me with things, or I put something on my calendar. So there's literally places on my calendar to like clear my head and dump stuff, right? And things in my office around me that help remind me of certain things that let me release baggage and so on and so forth, right? And those were the initial ways of doing it until I established the muscle memory, right, to self-talk and do it with myself without needing those visual cues, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
It's so important, man. So important. It's like, I think we have habits that serve us and habits that don't. And the more quickly we're able to examine the ones that don't, the better our lives will be.
Absolutely. Okay. So now for the fourth key, that's typically not the fourth key.
Yeah, no kidding. I know. It's like the fourth key. It's so funny because in my mind, I have this like thing that I feel like this is the order it needs to be presented. I think this is what I need to have today, what I need to hear, and how it can change others. So third key is something I called entering the storm, and this is important. Unfortunately, I gotta share this story because it involves my dad. And my dad, my dad's from Sierra Leone, West Africa. He's like Mufasa from The Lion King, right? He's like the wisest man ever. And he passed away last year in February of 2019, and I mean, he's the best man, the best human I've ever known. He taught me a lesson. He said, around when I was struggling with crisis, and again, I had my suicidal ideations and my attempt and all sorts of things going on. My dad, being such a wise man, he's like Mufasa, like from The Lion King, right? He pulled me aside one day, shortly afterwards. He said, and I can do his voice pretty well by now. He said, "Shola." That's like how my dad talked. He said, "Shola, I need you to be the buffalo, not the cow." I'm like, dude, what are you talking about? I don't even understand what my guy is talking about. But then, yeah, and it's funny because one of my girls, Kat Stock, is on here, and she knows my dad. So thank you for that, Kat. I appreciate you so much. But he said, like, be the buffalo, not the cow. I'm like, Dad, I don't understand what that means. And what he said next was so deep and so true and so life-changing if you can listen to it. He said, "Shola, when a storm comes overhead, boy, what the cow does instinctively is she turns away from the storm and she runs away from the storm, boy. But what it does foolishly is she ends up staying in the storm longer as she tries to escape from it. The buffalo! What the buffalo does, boy, is when the storm comes, what he does is he instinctively turns into the storm, knowing that discomfort is waiting for him. And he goes into the storm. And what happens during this experience is, one, what happens is that his time in the storm is shortened. But more importantly, because he put himself through that adversity, knowingly and consciously, he has become stronger and better by the experience. Be the buffalo, not the cow. I was like, yo, Dad, that was deep. Yo, and I'll tell you, because my guy comes so strong with the wisdom, man. And oh man, cousin Toshin's on there. Hey, so yeah, man, that was really helpful for me. But what this meant for me was the willingness to go into the storm, meaning inside, to really examine behaviors and deep beliefs that didn't serve me. Some of them that people think of are, I'm not good enough, or I'm invisible, or no one can be trusted, or I'm unlovable, or people are out to get me.
Yes.
Or there's no reason why I should be here. And if you have these thoughts of being unlovable, not being good enough, not being competent, not whatever it may be, my thought is you need to go into the storm. And this is an important one. Go inside and do what's uncomfortable, that really uncomfortable work. Because if you're going to do self-care as a leader, as a human being, if you have beliefs that weaken you for the fights that are coming, and there's so many, you're not going to be at your optimum level to be able to serve yourself and others. So you need to look at these beliefs. Personally speaking, I told you mine was I'm not good enough, right?
Absolutely.
So what I did is I went, where did this come from? What came from being bullied when I was a kid, and that people thought I was dumb, and I was, I struggled with, I struggled in school. I was considered learning disabled. I'd never be able to do anything, and beliefs stuck with me. That until I was an adult, I finally had to revisit and said, these things aren't true, but I allowed them to control me and drive the direction of my life for far longer than I needed to. And that's not okay.
Yep.
That's what going in the storm is, sitting with these feelings and trying to understand, where do they come from? Are they true? Why do I believe them? And most importantly, what is the thought that I can take from this long-held belief and reverse it and create a thought that's more meaningful, more useful, and most importantly, going to serve you in the long run.
Yeah. And I'm hearing in that too, it's kind of dispelling fear, right? False evidence appearing real as a part of that storm.
Yeah, man. Go with the acronyms.
I'm hearing that. I'm just hearing that from what you're saying. It feels implied.
Man. I mean, I know that false evidence appearing real is true. I mean, it's like, look, the reality is we're all scared. I mean, we're all broken.
Yeah.
I mean, I wish people would just be okay with that. Like, we're all broken. Nicole, my girl's out here. Nicole Munir. Yes. Hey, listen, I'm going to, I'll work with you on that. And I'll see if I can do a speaking engagement at your workplace about that.
I wholeheartedly agree. That's the next book.
Be the buffalo, not the cow. No one's going to buy that book. No one's buying that book.
If you can get just record the story first, right? There's got to be an audible commercial of it, right? As long as you get the audible commercial of what you said, you're good. You're good.
Oh my gosh.
Good.
Oh man, whatever it takes. Listen, whatever I can do to serve, man. It's like that's really my hope. And if I can make a difference somewhere, somehow, I'm down. It's just I'm in a place now where there's such a need to be a positive voice. And I know that if I'm suffering with my own brokenness and I'm not able to address that, then I can't serve as a leader. I am a reluctant leader in a sense, but I'm a leader. And I know I belong in a leadership place to be able to help people through this struggle that we're going through. Mm-hmm. I'm not perfect. I don't have all the answers, but the good thing is as a leader, you don't need to have all the answers. Right. You don't need to know everything. Absolutely. But you can't be a person who doesn't know anything. You just got to know, you don't have to know everything.
Absolutely. And the only thing I'd add to what you said, and then we'll wrap up, is as you go through that storm and you're leading your team, be open and honest with them that you're going through the storm and that you're going to do it in a agile manner, right? And some people, there are all kind of acronyms you could use, but one is plan, do, review, and right. So I'm sorry, plan, do, review, and then you change, right? So you plan it, what you're going to do, you do it, and then you review what happened, and then you change as you need to based on the results. And sometimes you do that quarterly, right? Based on certain goals and so on and so forth. Sometimes you do it monthly, sometimes you do it weekly. But in big storms where the unpredictability is high and you're in crisis moments, you almost need to do that daily and let folks know that's going to be our rhythm. Like, we're going to have a daily stand up. We're going to be talking about this and bring up your presence and bring up the energy of it, even on video calls, make it a standing meeting so people feel fired up and that you're knowing that you're through that storm together. And look, you're going to just be agile, make things happen. So Shola, let's wrap up. We've been about an hour. I want to make sure we wrap up and respect.
Dang, really? I feel like we just got started, man.
We just have so much fun together, man. That's we always have so much fun.
You're my guy, dude. You're my guy.
We always have fun. So, all right. So let's recap the 4 keys really quickly in any order you want to.
I'll do them in the order that I actually have them in my book. By the way, that offer still stands. If you're listening and you want a copy of the workbook to be able to put this into action, email me at sholarichards.com. Please put in the subject line workbook so I know it's that. And I'll forward it to you and you can use it. It can be really useful for you and I'd be happy to serve you in that way. And I think you'll really enjoy it. I wrote this a couple of weeks ago and I think you'll really enjoy it. So key number 1, and this is the order that you'll see it in the book. The key number 1 is to focus on the things that you have the power to control. This is one of the most important things that leaders and humans can do, especially in times of crisis. Key number 2 is to practice self-compassion. How we talk about ourselves during these really challenging times is going to be so important. And how we treat each other, ourselves, will allow us to be able to be more effective to others. Key number 3 is this thing called entering the storm, where you have to go into the most uncomfortable, mucky, icky stuff and turn some rocks over and find squiggly things under them to really understand exactly what it is that you need to fix, things that may be serving you in ways that you do not want them to be serving you. So deep held beliefs like I'm not good enough, or I don't belong, or I'm unlovable, or I'm broken. And key number 4 is to create psychological safety with others so people can feel safe coming to you for help and that you can create an environment where people can share more freely. That's needed now probably more than ever.
So good. These are such good nuggets. Hopefully people got some takeaway. I don't know how you would not have a few takeaways from this. Seriously, that you can use right after you get off this call, right? I don't know how you would not have some takeaways. But Shola, thank you again, man, for taking the time out of your schedule to do this. I'm so excited that we were able to do this, man. And I'm looking forward to people enjoying the rebroadcast. It's literally available as soon as we get done.
Yay for technology.
Absolutely. Right at the same link and everything. It's right there on Facebook Live, right there on YouTube. Literally, as soon as we get done, you can hit play and watch it again as much as you want. Share it with friends and loved ones so they could benefit from the wisdom that was shared. And again, that's actionable. So for myself and Mr. Shola Richards, thank you for joining us for another episode of the Core Link Solution. Have a great night.